Hey RV people, are you wasting money unnecessarily fixing what isn't broken on your RV? Is the way you're using your RV actually potentially making you sick? And a bunch of other little things. My name's Josh, RV Nerd. Welcome to Bish's RV. Today, I've got, I don't know, somewhere between 10 to 12 quick little tips for you to keep more money in your pocket, keep your RV in your driveway and out of the service centers, and potentially keep you from getting sick. First up, don't leave your black tank valve open all the time, especially if you have on-site sewer. When people have on-site sewer, especially newer people, they make the mistake of thinking, oh, everything just runs right down the pipe, sort of like it does at home. An RV waste system is not like what you have at home. What will happen if you do that is the liquid mass will run off and out the pipe like you're thinking, but the solid mass will build up. And then you end up with the dreaded pyramid. And that sucks no matter how you slice it. Save yourself some money, keep a couple extra bucks in your pocket every year, and stop replacing perfectly fine anode rods. Every year, well, almost every week, but especially in springtime, I see people post a picture like this and they say, boy, I'm so happy I opened up my water heater and saw how bad my anode rod was. Make sure you replace it, guys. There's nothing wrong with this thing. Stop replacing them if they look like this. So at the very inside of this, there's like a core that all this other stuff that's eating away is mounted onto. You don't need to replace this until basically all of the stuff that is deteriorating is gone. It's doing its job. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. Now, there are some water heaters, I think Atwood water heaters, that have an aluminum tank. They don't need an anode rod. This is for RV water heaters that have a steel tank. So if your RV has one of these, keep using one of these. Don't just get rid of it and replace it with a plastic plug. And if your RV water heater only has a plastic plug, you don't need to start using one of these. This next one sounds kind of crazy, but as I learn more about RVs, something I discovered is I'm not really convinced you should be drinking from the freshwater system in most RVs. You know, if you need to wash your hands, if you need to wash some dishes, if you need to take a shower, that's fine. But drinking the water? Let me run this past you. I got kind of tipped off to this recently here when someone said, you know, they camp a couple times a year, and every time they go camping, they come back and they don't feel real great. And got kind of looking at it and talking about it. And my mom's a family nurse practitioner. My dad's a longtime avid RVer, and I was running this past them, and they went,
oh yeah, no, we almost always exclusively drink bottled water or something that's been filtered through the RV.
And I'm like, why? Basically, unless you are very frequently sanitizing your RV's water system, it's building bacteria. And that happens enough. And some people have certain sensitivities, and different bacteria have different concentrations in different areas. Some people can just end up making themselves sick. Here's another one that twists people's heads around. Have you ever had the experience where you kick on your RV's furnace and your air conditioner turns on? This one is something that it's one of those things that never used to be a thing that happened, and in the modern era of RVs has kind of become a thing. What's actually not happening is your air conditioner compressor is not kicking on. It's the fan system. When RV air conditioners and furnaces used to act totally separately, it really wasn't generally a thing. But with the era of these modern kind of thermostats right here, what sometimes happens is when people turn on their furnace system, the system is set to fan instead of auto. So the way that reads is anytime heating or cooling is required, it kicks on the fan to disperse that air through the RV. And that's not the way you're expecting it. So if you, when it's furnace time, kick the system over to auto instead of fan, and this guy is going to stay a lot more quiet. And that's one of those things people bring it to us thinking there's a problem with their RV, and they pay tech diag fees only to find out that it's just a usage item. This one, people sometimes want to argue with me about it, but keep in mind, there's zero financial benefit for us in saying this. Frankly, we'd make more money if I didn't say this. For the love of all that's holy, don't use or stop using under slide jack supports. Let me show you why. To do this, I'm going to have to utilize some very high-tech tools. Basically a cardboard box and a chunk of styrofoam. For the purposes of this demonstration, the cardboard box represents the RV. This represents a slide out, not super complicated. what you think you're doing is by supporting under here, you're helping support against downward pressure. But what happens is the position of the slide out is relative in three-dimensional space to the position of the RV itself. So if you think, well, I've got it right here, I've got it anchored and I'm helping support it, but if the RV rocks because of the wind, or if one side or corner settles a little bit because of soft ground, what's going to happen is you're pushing up on only one part of the slide while the rest of the RV is actually no longer on one flat level plane. So if you notice how this tilted in but this did not, like a rack and pinion slide, its seals are engaged by gravity. It's the weight of the slide trying to fall out of the RV that engages the slide seals around the sides and the top, not the bottom. That's done from the motor pulling. All of the mechanicals exist under a rack and pinion slide. But any slide system, if you push it out of whack like that, you're gonna have a problem. Like if you try to retract this now, the top's gonna go in, but the bottom won't. And no matter what the case, you've created a problem. Here's another controversial one where we could make more money if I didn't talk about it, so there's zero financial reason for me to say this. Please don't strap crap to your ladder. And I get it. Once again, there's an entire world of accessories out there, and there's a bunch of things that are designed to attach to that ladder. And I'm sitting here telling you not to do it. So I don't care if it's lawn chairs or a picnic table or your blue tote tank or bikes or something like that. RV fixed rear mounted ladders are only designed to support weight when the RV is not moving, not bouncing down the road, and in a very controlled manner going straight up and vertically. When an RV's bouncing down the road, the G-forces that happen there, like have you ever watched like NASCAR or IndyCar racing or something like that and looked at the G-forces that that vehicle drivers are enforced under just on those curves? Something that normally weighs 20 pounds suddenly flashes to 60, 80, 100 pounds, and you get enough of that bouncing enough times bouncing on that ladder. Like you wouldn't stand on that ladder going up and down and bounce because you'd break it. But that's literally what you're doing when you're going down the road. We have so many people come in with self-inflicted leaks as a result of that, of putting stuff on the back, but like you didn't know, and people in a parts department sold you that part or you ordered it off Amazon, but somehow they get away with not claiming liability on this. I'm just recommending, don't do that. And it's your choice. If you want to, if you want to, and you have a good time, I hope nothing goes wrong. But if it does, we're gonna see in a place like this, and you're going to have a repair bill due, and it's gonna take way longer than you want, and you're gonna be mad at us the whole time. Another thing that sometimes trips people up, and they just don't realize, because nobody bothered telling them, is learn how your brake controller works. And again, I don't fault people for this. You know, they don't know what they don't know. But whether you have a brake controller installed or you have one integrated into the vehicle like you see right here, a lot of people don't realize that you need to adjust the gain, the output on those things, or else it's not gonna work. So while I do want to encourage owners to empower themselves, to protect themselves, literally for safety reasons, my answer is not exclusively, it's the customer's fault, read the freaking manual. And I want to explain a situation that just happened here a couple days ago. Like we have a 72-hour return policy. If somebody doesn't like how their RV tows, even if there's nothing wrong with the RV, we'll swap you out, we'll refund it, we'll do what we need to do. The place they purchased from locally here doesn't have the same policy. They had a 9,800 pound tow rated half ton. They purchased a small lightweight trailer that weighed barely 3,000 pounds dry, had a gross vehicle weight under 5,000 pounds. When you're rated for 9,800, there's no reason that vehicle should have felt like it was getting pushed through a stoplight when the person hit the brakes. So they brought it to us and said something's wrong with this, and the place that I bought it from, they've been absolutely no help. And we looked at it and we realized that their brake controller was set on a 2. They go from 0 to, or like 1 to 10, basically. Nobody told them that you need to adjust how much output comes on your brakes. As dumb as this sounds, something like that could have given them a better experience. It could have avoided a potential disastrous situation, literal health and safety. It could have kept them camping and not worrying about the RV and missing a camping trip because they felt they had to come to a service center. Moving on from there, if your RV has a tankless on-demand water heater like this, which are now the strong majority of RVs produced, I've got a couple quick tips for you. The first of which is you need decent water flow for these things to work properly. We've had, tracking statistics through our RV Fix system, we've had an uptick of folks who are bringing us RVs citing that the RV water heater is not working correctly and we're not able to replicate the problem. And the most common culprit? Cool, stretchy, modern, space-age hose things. And that's why we can't replicate it at the shop. We don't use those back in the shop because they can restrict water flow. The nature of those hoses, they want to go back to their shrinky-dink position, not the expanded blown-up position. And as a result, they are constantly restricting water flow. And when the hose has been sitting there for a while and the pressure builds up in the line, when you first turn on your hot water, it feels like it's working the way it's supposed to, but then it suddenly stops working the way it's supposed to. It's because as the pressure has reduced, that hose has restricted the flow enough that it doesn't work. So if you have an on-demand water heater, just use the proper like blue water drinking hose, not even the green hose. That's a different hose. That's fine for like garden stuff, not for freshwater drinking stuff. The shrinky hoses are cool. They're great. If you want to use them for campsite cleanup, that's fine. Don't use them as the primary inlet from a city water connection. Speaking of on-demand water heaters, when it comes to winterizing those things, we highly recommend a full winterization with antifreeze, not just the traditional old school blowout method. And you might notice if you've camped for a long time how some of this is a little bit different now than what it used to be. Like the old gas and electric water heaters, I personally still prefer the antifreeze blowout method, but these new tankless on-demand water heaters, they work a little bit differently. And essentially the heat exchanger back there, there's too many areas that are too small and have too many nooks and crannies that just a straight air method has a greater propensity to leave a little bit of water still somehow pooled up in there. And it takes one ice cube to blow that sucker up and ruin your dewinterization come springtime. Which leads me to my next tip right here. Whether it's winterizing or dewinterizing, don't forget the outside shower. We have found that is the #1 most frequently missed thing when winterizing or dewinterizing, because when you're giving it that pink drink of death or you're doing the air blowout method, you're in the RV, you open the faucets, you blast the shower or whatever, it makes sense, but you forget about the stuff outside of the camper. And if there's water left in that shower head on the outside in an outside shower, it'll freeze, it'll break, it'll dribble all over. Sometimes where those things are located, it can result in water getting into like walls and compartments of the RV where you can't see it until it's already way too big of a problem. But when dewinterizing, what will happen is people will, they'll open their low point drains, they'll run the water until that goes out, but they forget to run some water through the outside shower. And the line going to the outside shower and the shower head itself will usually still have a measure of antifreeze in it that'll back bleed through the system. Usually it's non-toxic, that won't tend to kill you or anything like that, but depending on the type of antifreeze that you use, some of them are animal fat based, it can make your RV, especially the water stuff, just smell like the inside of a dead raccoon's butt. Now, as is the case with a lot of these topics, I have a more detailed video on this, but if you want to do something like a lithium battery instead of a conventional flooded marine lead acid battery, it is not as simple as just taking this battery and hooking it to the 2 terminals on the RV if you're going to do it right. And again, without getting super technical on this, flooded batteries, lithium batteries work, operate, and behave a little bit differently. And if you try to mix them together, such as if you plug your vehicle into an RV that has lithium battery, this can try to pull more juice and it could actually potentially damage some of your vehicle's electrical system, like your alternator. There's a way around that though, but it comes at the extra cost. What you need is a DC to DC charger. Now, there's isolated, there's non-isolated. One kind of goes on towables, one kind of goes on motorized. If you don't know what all that means, just make sure you are getting involved with a service center that can properly guide you through that. And if they don't ask you about these, you maybe don't want to buy anything there. There is another lower dollar way around it that I don't love, but at your discretion, it could work for you. You could actually have the charge line in your vehicle disconnected. So the charge line is the thing where your vehicle will send juice back to the trailer. If you disconnect that, then the trailer battery and your vehicle battery can't talk to one another. That's the least expensive way to do this, but it also means that you're no longer providing that in-motion travel charge. And when a lot of these RVs have things like 12-volt compressor fridges, you are depleting your battery a lot, and most solar packages don't fully offset those things. And the last tip I have for you today, people forget to do this: clean your slide seals. And I think largely because it tends to be an out of sight, out of mind thing, people don't think about it. But again, let me run you down the experiment thought train process here. If this thing gets dirty, every time the slide comes in and out, you are sandpapering it and grinding it down and grinding against this essentially. And eventually you're going to get some micro grooves in there that little bit of water can seep through, and then it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're going to end up with water penetration just from opening and closing this enough that this gets worn down. But this tip's a bit of a two-parter, because remember, you have seals not just outside of this slide out, inside as well. Whether it's a bulb seal, the flange behind me right here, you want to keep that clean. You want to clean both sides of this because it wipes both ways. So you might need to open the slide, clean it then, and then close it all the way or partially, whatever you need to do to get to the other side. And it's a very simple, easy thing. Basically just warm water, maybe a little bit of Dawn dish soap. Don't get crazy with it. And if you choose to use a slide seal conditioner, use one that's water-based and non-aerosol, because sometimes those other things can eat away at these. And that's what I have for you today, folks. As I've mentioned a couple times previously, I have more in-depth, longer videos diving further into several of these topics. Today, I just wanted to give you some real quick, rapid-fire looks and thoughts on a few things that will probably be enough for most people for more situations. If you're more curious, there's more details there. I also have mentioned how, some of this is data that we've gotten from our RV Fix service. If you're not familiar with that, I've got a link down there where you can learn more about that. Basically, it's like having a tech in your back pocket that can help walk you through things. If you want to learn more about that, that's there for you too, at your discretion. And if you'd like to see the next thing that we figure out or talk about, or whatever the case may be, hit that subscribe button. Maybe we'll see you then. So take care, stay safe, have fun, and happy camping, everyone.